How do you draw with the new Magnus bot on chess.com? Hey everybody, it's Grandmaster Max Illingworth here, and I'm very proud to say that I actually managed to hold a draw against the new Magnus bot on chess.com on my second try. Actually, in the first try, I managed to get a much better position out of the opening, then just completely self-destructed for whatever reason. If you need the proof, here it is. This is the game. You can see the end with a draw by repetition. But let's see how we got there. And the nice thing is I didn't just draw, but I was actually on the better side of this draw as well, where I was the one continually pressing. And I'm also kind of curious to myself to see how I could have potentially played better in this game. By the way, if you're enjoying the video, do make sure to like and consider subscribing. So Magnus bot plays knight f6. I think normally he was sort of playing moves like e6 in the last years, would be more fitting with the, with Carlsen's approach. Of course, g6 is the main line. Actually, I'll show you what he did in the first game as well, because that was kind of interesting, where the bots basically played, in a very weird way actually, playing this move of e5, which is, not really a thing in this position. After c6, knight f6, d4, I just managed to get a really big advantage out of the opening, just going d5 and getting this really nice Lopez structure with the pawn on d5 not being able to be challenged. Went bishop d3 and the game went along these lines, and black is just significantly better in various ways, but end up kind of screwing it up a bit badly where, for example, I kind of let him get in c4 later, which was completely unnecessary, and all the other things are just like no right to allow whatsoever. Whereas if I just play something like queen e2, like just very normal, bring the knight to g3, play a4 at the right time. If I do something like this, I would just have a clear advantage, something that the chess.com bot doesn't appreciate, but of course I've studied these Lopez type structures quite a lot, as most grandmasters have, so we understand, that this is just clearly better for whites on a strategic level. So, returning to the game, we had knight f6, and here I decided to play a approach a little bit guided towards the bot, because the move knight c3 is sort of considered the most critical here, but I sort of felt also based on the fact that the bot was making really serious strategic mistakes in the first game, that I might be better off heading for a more strategic type of position, which is why I decided to take on c6 and play d3, which you can do against almost anything in the Rossolimo system. Funny enough, the one system where it doesn't work so well is against d6, but that's another story. I was thinking that maybe the bot would go bishop g4 and play into these lines where you try to just have this very solid and flexible kind of structure, but instead it played knight d7, and, well, bishop f4 is a nice way to make sure black doesn't get a strong center with e5. I kind of expected the Carlsen bot to play g6. I just castled, bishop g7. And now I played this move e5. I mean, you could sort of make an argument for a few different moves here. But I mean, if you play a move like queen c1 as the chess.com engine suggesting, I don't like that as much, because you're just ending up in a rather lame version of the bishop takes c6, Rossolimo lines. And I just don't really think white has any special advantage here. So I played a move e5, being a little bit more critical, killing the knight and the bishop, not letting him get in the move e5 so quickly. And, probably the best plan for black here is just to go knight f8 at some point and just bring the knight towards d4. That would be one way to take advantage. For example, the fact that my bishop is maybe not absolutely ideal on f4. And I mean, if I do play a move like, let's say, queen to d2, trying to meet knight 6 with bishop h6, they can cut this off with h6 as well, so the idea falls a little bit flat. Also, knight f8 does help solve the problem of their bishop, because if they're able to recycle the bishop, then, that's one piece that we'll see later in the game gets really stuck behind, the walls. So if black plays knight f8, he's probably just fine, but after castles, I sort of felt like I'm probably getting a little bit of an advantage here. At the very least, my position is substantially easier to play. I spent a lot of time thinking on this position. I was sort of thinking, what's the best move order to play, like knight c3, queen d2, rook e1, h3, bishop to h6. And it sort of occurred to me that if I play a move like h3, for example, that black might just play h6 and not give us an easy bishop h6. So I felt that this would be the most punitive move order, at least from a practical point of view. Black does play knight b6. which I think is a decent move, trying to free the knight and the bishop. I play h3 just to avoid that. And here's a little bit of a surprise, actually. I thought that the bot would probably play some move like c4. And we get this kind of interesting structure, where black's got some, some nice squares for the pieces. But we also have a decent grip over the light squares here. So, yeah, this would lead to an interesting battle where it's probably equal, but I find it a little bit easier to play white because of the good grip over the dark squares. But black's grip over the light squares should fully offset this. Instead, though, black played knight d5, which the engine doesn't hate. I mean, it kind of makes sense given that, the bot is basically a slightly weakened version of Stockfish. It makes sense that it will have a similar thought process to the chess.com analysis here. But it kind of, bishop h6 is a move I want to play anyway, right? To trade off the bishop pair, and, obviously black's not really going to ever take on h6, because then we are threatening knight g5 and mate, and that's kind of annoying. So black goes bishop f5, kind of expected this move. I fought for a while and ultimately decided to play the move knight to c3 here. I sort of was calculating, like, whether do I want to, accept the doubled pawns or not. And then I realized, I actually don't need to worry about it, because I can just play bishop takes g7 and then take with the queen. The computer has some other ideas where I think some other moves might give a slightly bigger advantage, but the advantage of my approach is that it is pretty safe. Like, if you take the position it comes up in the game, so black here is somewhat threatening bishop to takes h3 here. Actually, I'm not sure if it's that real of a threat. Like, if I play rook e1... Okay, it is actually a little bit of a threat when you play it out. The computer's just being dumb here. But yeah, if you take the move I played of queen b3, which I think is not like the top engine line, but I think it's a very practical move. I will admit I'm a little bit surprised that the engine took on b3 and improved my structure for free. But if you look at a position like this, I mean, white is virtually never losing this position. I mean, you've got the extra space. Your knight is going to be better than the bishop in general in this kind of locked structure. You've got this open file, the half-open file for the rook you can work with. So yeah, it's not the biggest edge possible according to the engine, but it's very, very safe. And yeah, the bot played the move a5 here. I do think there's a lot to be said for h5 and just trying to make g4 and this pawn advance as hard as possible to achieve, because I did feel like I kind of outplayed the bot a little bit over some of the next moves, and I'll just show you how I did that. Also, let me know in the comments below what is the most amount of moves that you've lasted against the Carlsen bot. Of course, if you also drew a beat with it, let me know, but if you're watching this video, chances are you haven't yet got a result against the bot. Actually, at this point, a really interesting idea. Actually, it was a little bit later that the idea occurred to me. I was going to say that it would be interesting for black to go b5, a4, and potentially try to create counterplay against b2. This was something that it looks very sort of unhealthy to weaken the structure like this, but it occurred to me I have to keep an eye out on this move of a4. Like, let's say, for example, if I play rook a to e1, like, this would actually be a mistake, because if black is able to open up the file for the rooks, that also, it gives him counterplay, and then suddenly the bishop starts to become better than my knight. So it's quite important I keep the position stable and keep things relatively closed. The move f4 is what I played here. It's just kind of the most logical to start pushing those pawns forward. Black plays the move b6. Again, black should probably try to go for some Berlin-style fortress and make it as hard as possible for me to get in the move g4. Because in the game, I was sort of able to get that in relatively easily. In fact, the machine is saying I could even play g4 immediately. At the time, I was a little bit unsure what happens if black plays h5 and tries to disrupt this, but apparently I can just go f5 and this is just going to be much better for white. So yeah, technically king f2 is not the most precise because it gives him time to go h5 and stop g4. But in the game, the bot played this very passive h6 and I'm sort of able to get the position I want where I'm like, okay, I can just meet h5 with king g3 and consolidate in this sort of way. The bot instead plays the move f5, which is actually probably not as bad as I thought it was, but I sort of felt like I was quite happy with the position closing up more when I have the bishop, knight versus the bishop. Trying to do something with it, though, is another thing, but I kind of go into Carlsen mode, funnily enough, and just start slowly improving the position. I was just very, very cautious at this point, because I don't want to give him a good moment, say, to play g5 and, say, open things up for the bishop or something like this. And, if I do move the rook, I was a little concerned that might open the door for some counterplay with a4, as I was mentioning a bit earlier. So I play rook f2, just very slowly improve the position. The move rook f8 doesn't really achieve anything. I think the rook actually belongs here. Maybe the bot had some wacky idea of trying to swing the rook to b4 to prepare a4 or something, but my move knight f3 just stops that. Rook bc8, and white is slightly better, but the question then becomes, how can we make progress? And this is a case where sometimes, just blindly following the engine isn't always the best way. By the way, I should point out, I didn't have engine assistance whatsoever at all. I was just using purely my own head. Taking a bit of time, a minute or two on each move in general, just make sure I wasn't missing anything obvious. Playing it kind of like a classical time control game. So the move g5 is what the engine will initially suggest. But after h5, I think this is just a fortress. I don't really see a way through for white. Maybe you can try to get in some c4 and d4, but I just wasn't really seeing it mounting to anything. So I played rook g1, just kind of preparing to build up on the king side. And also was kind of gambling a little bit that the bot wouldn't play rook a8, because in that case, I just probably have to go back with rook a1 at some point anyway. Engine has a different idea, but yeah, that sort of was my intention. That's going to bring the rook back there. But fortunately, he played a move rook b8, and you can sort of see in these strategic positions the bot's just going to make a lot of these little mistakes that can sort of add up over time. I played this move at knight h4, which is not the top line, but it has struck me as being very logical during the game to try to get something happening on the G file and sort of build that tension. And I think that when he plays the move of fg4, this is something that I'm very happy to see. I'm able to now have a bit more space in the center, and also have a potential break with f5 in the future. Now, admittedly, I never quite found the perfect time in this game to get in a sort of breakthrough, but I'll show you how it played out. So king h8. The bots making a lot of these moves are, not the absolute best, but are not terrible either. It's kind of similar for me, actually. Here, I kind of missed a little bit of an opportunity, where the move I played knight f3 is still fine, but I think that probably the move rook h2 is also a good option, and might have been a little bit more precise. So after knight f3, he went bishop d5, king e3, and actually this was kind of an interesting moment. I 100% expected the bot to trade the bishop for the knight, because my knight just has way more flexibility than the bishop, which is kind of a bit of a ghost piece in the structure. It doesn't have an easy target available. So I was expecting the bot to go for something like this, where white is definitely better. You've got more space. You can, keep grinding like king e4, go for an f5 break. Kind of a little bit curious, actually, why the bot isn't so keen on a move like e6, which would seem most natural to my mind. But apparently the f5 break gets even stronger if you're going to get a passport on e5 to go with it as such. Which is, well, at least that's what my guess was. But turns out my understanding was again stronger than the bots, that this is indeed the way that black should defend. On the other hand, if you don't play the move of f5 here, how else are you making progress? I guess you could go for c3 and d4 and try to create a second weakness, but realistically I do think this position probably is one that black can hold without too much difficulty, especially when you're a computer, not a human. But instead the bot plays not this line, it plays king to g7. Which, I was obviously very happy to see. I made sure that my knight wasn't going to get traded off. Probably knight h4 is actually even better in order to try to go for knight f5. I kind of wish I had done this now, but, knight 2 is not terrible either here. I still keep a pretty nice advantage. And at this point, I decided to play the move rook g3, and now the bot is starting to realize that things are going quite bad, that I do actually have a big advantage in this case, because the bishop's really off, and, I've got all the breaks in this position. So at rook h8. I played rook h2, and this is around the point where I started to feel like I should have something quite good here, but I wasn't sure exactly what that is. And in retrospect, I probably saw my next few moves weren't particularly good, where I think that the correct plan I should go for is probably to play rook to g1, and sort of do it as kind of a preparation for the f5 break. So that is, if they play like king g7, I can now go f5 successfully, because if they take, they can't take back a second time because of their king being in check, which is actually a pretty big deal in this position. This is actually just going to be a winning position for white, in fact. just with the space and, all this sort of thing coming in. And the h6 pawn is a very big weakness as well. So yeah, after c4, I mean, this is actually just winning for white, where, their king is stuck, the rooks are stuck, and, everything just falls apart. Of course, black doesn't have to play into this. I mean, they can play other moves, like rook fg8, for example. They could also have taken on e4, I guess, but yeah, the point kind of remains the same, that, we'll get in the f5 break. That will make the h6 pawn very weak, and then white will have very good chances to win the game. Unfortunately, I kind of went a little bit in the wrong direction, where I played rook g8-3. Okay, this in itself is not so bad, but I think my next move is a clear... Well, I was going to say a clear mistake. The engine doesn't think it's actually that bad, but I played knight c3, kind of just wanting to try and potentially reroute my knight to some other square. Now, one good thing about the knight on e4 is that it was stopping the next move that the bot played here, which is the move of b5. And, now I suddenly have to contend with what if they play c4 at some point. Now, at first glance after rook g3, it might seem that, c4, just is a weird looking kind of move in that, you're just giving yourself double pawns or even now weak and isolated. But the point is that black does get some counterplay potentially with moves like rook b8 and attacking the pawn on b2. It's actually quite interesting to see that the engine's suggestion is not actually to play d4, but rather to sort of take and sort of let them undouble their pawns. But sort of saying that because you get in the f5 break, using a few tactics, that the position is still going to be really good for white, because again of how bad the black bishop is in this structure. And it's true the pieces are also a bit passive on the king side, right? Yeah, the bot instead played the move g5, which at first sight looks like a mistake, but actually I realized it was quite clever what it was doing. Where after f5, its idea is that it now has this trick of h5. And the bots are just really good at coming up with these sorts of tricks, actually. So, in this case, yeah, basically the move I played here is not the best. Like, this is sort of probably the last chance I have to really play for a win. What I should do is I should just play rook g3, forcing the move of h4, because if they do play h takes g4, you've got a nice little trick here with f6, where you're sort of able to, win a rook with this little overload as such. So black would be forced to play h4, and yeah, then you have this idea of knight b1. We can sort of go c4, swing the knight around, and it's not winning for white, but it's what keeps the chances to win the game alive, let's say. But instead I played the move knight e4, because I sort of felt like I had to try to force the play to avoid to avoid this sort of going against me. But then this position here after rook g1, bishop e4, I kind of started to realize I'm just not really better anymore here. I don't think it makes a big difference whether you take with a pawn or a king, but I decided to take with a pawn after some prolonged thought. And the rest of the game kind of was just very sort of, normal, like just rook d2, and the engine at first says black's a tiny bit better, but it's actually just equal here. Like, you're just going to kind of follow whichever way their rook goes, and they're not going to be able to make any progress. The main thing is just not to get, like, too impatient and, like, let their king in or something. But I feel like Carlsen, if he was actually playing and not the bot, possibly he would have, like, not played it the very forcing way he did, but, maybe played something like, rook h8, tried to bring the king over the queen side, and, see what happens from there. But after a4, then after rook a4, like, I realized this was just a draw, and because, I mean, this pawn, the king is stuck here, stopping this pawn, and their king's stuck over in this sector, stopping my pawn majority on the king side from queening. Just make sure you don't fall for c3 and, the pawn queening. Obviously, I avoided that with c3. And the rest of the game was just basically just shuffling around, because there's just nothing either side can do. His king is stuck in the square of my pawn, and my king is stuck in the square of his pawn. So yeah, this is how the game ultimately ended. Anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this video. I know I certainly enjoyed showing you how I drew with the Magnus bot. Maybe at some point I'll even find a way to beat it. If I spend a bit more time thinking on the moves, I think I have a reasonable chance. I mean, this was really the best opportunity I had. Like, if I play rook g1, I think I have a very decent chance of winning the game, because, like, the engine's giving, like, plus 1.1 or so. And also the trend was really going my way. I was kind of outplaying the bot, just using my strategic understanding, slowly building up and keeping control. and just sort of letting it make the mistakes it's kind of programmed to make, because this isn't the mitten spot after all. Anyway, yeah, let me know in the comments below, how well you're doing against the Magnus bot, how long you've lasted, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Take care.